Welcome back to the drafting table, everyone. I'm your host for this explainer and brought to you by Forge College. So, in our last session, we laid out the broad principles of mitigation across the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM, and the Solana virtual machine, or SVM. But today we're moving straight from abstract theory into hard practice. We are going to map out exactly how to adapt your cozy EVM mitigations to the SVM architecture. If you've been following along with our From EVM to SVM transition track, well, this is exactly where the rubber meets the road.
Here's our engineering schematic for today. We'll quickly cover the environment shift, then hit our 3 rules of translation. After that, we'll dive into some real-world adaptations, build out our comparison table, and wrap up with verification. Let's just jump right in.
All right, part 1, the execution environment shift. Let's talk about moving over to the SVM.
Let's just address the elephant in the room right off the bat, okay? Moving from the EVM to the SVM can cause a serious bit of culture shock. A lot of the core assumptions you've relied on to keep your smart contracts safe, yeah, they're going to vanish into thin air. To put it bluntly, where did your global gas counter go? Look, working in the EVM is kind of like driving on a cozy single-lane toll road. The network manages the traffic, it checks your ticket, and it conveniently stops your car if you run out of gas. But the SVM? Oh man, the SVM is a multi-lane, high-speed highway. You have to bring your own ID, map out exactly which lanes you'll be using in advance, and actively manage your own speed. If you're relying on the environment to just magically pump the brakes for you, you are absolutely going to crash.
So the fundamental decision you have to make when porting a mitigation is pretty binary. If your protection relies on EVM-specific primitives, things like transaction nonces, block gas limits, or msg.sender access control, it's almost certainly not going to transfer over unchanged. However, if it relies on general computational invariants like explicit signature verification or the atomicity of a call sequence, well, that might actually survive the jump.
Moving right along to part 2, the 3 rules of translation. Since we know we literally can't just copy and paste our EVM habits, as tempting as that is, we need a reliable set of drafting tools. We need a way to measure whether an EVM mitigation actually survives the transition or if it needs to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. So we recommend evaluating every single mitigation along 3 concrete axes: assumption surface, enforcement locus, and observability. Let's break down what each of these actually means for your code.
First up is the assumption surface. You really have to ask yourself, what exactly must hold true in the environment for this mitigation to work? Think about EVM reentrancy guards for a second. They implicitly assume a synchronous call model and a single-threaded path, right? You have to name that exact assumption. Are you relying on a global address balance, a synchronous call stack? Whatever it is, name it so you can actually test it.
Second, we have the enforcement locus, basically who is enforcing the rules here. In the EVM, the network often enforces your safety for you. Replay protection is enforced by node-level nonces. Runaway loops are mercifully aborted by gas exhaustion. But in the SVM, you are shifting that locus of enforcement away from the network and directly into explicit artifacts within your own program code. You are no longer implicitly relying on the environment. You are explicitly building the safety net yourself.
And third, observability. Simple question: can you actually test this thing? We have to be able to observe and verify the mitigation in an integrated runtime environment. If your adaptation can't be tested dynamically, or at least caught by a static linter, I'm sorry, but it's just a theoretical wish.
Okay, part 3, real-world SVM adaptations. Let's pull out the blueprints. Let's look at a concrete example of where those comfortable EVM habits fail spectacularly in the SVM, and more importantly, how we fix them. Example 1 is reentrancy. In the EVM, you just use a simple Boolean mutex status flag. Why? Because the EVM's synchronous single-threaded stack means once a flag is set, any reentrant call instantly sees it. Done. But in the SVM, programs use cross-program invocations, or CPIs, which involve entirely separate accounts and parallel execution. A simple Boolean won't save you here at all. The adaptation? You've got to move to explicit account versioning, or you need to hold an exclusive mutable borrow of an account to model that critical section.
Example 2 is replay protection. EVM developers just assume the network enforces monotonically increasing nonces per account, which gives you cheap, built-in replay protection out of the box. But SVM environments don't expose identical nonce semantics. So, to adapt, you have to introduce explicit sequence numbers inside your program-owned accounts, which your program then manually validates on signed instructions.
Example 3, access control. EVM uses msg.sender to check caller identity. Super simple, very straightforward. In the SVM, however, authority is represented by account ownership, program-derived addresses, which we call PDAs, or signer lists. You don't just port msg.sender over. Instead, you explicitly verify signatures against an authority key stored securely in a rent-exempt account. Or, even better, you use PDA-derived authority that simply cannot be controlled externally.
All right, moving on to part 4, building the comparison table. We're going to transition right now from theoretical mapping to literally building a prototype verification artifact. You can actually just write a small TypeScript script to generate this table for your CI checks. But before we build it, let's just reinforce the core mantra of this lesson. Identify the assumption, determine if the environment enforces it, design your explicit adaptation, and finally, produce verification checks. Burn that pipeline right into your memory.
So, here is the structure of the markdown table you should be generating. We've got columns for mitigation, EVM rationale, SVM adaptation, and verification. And listen, including that EVM rationale column is absolutely critical. By explicitly stating why something worked in the EVM, you keep your entire mapping logical and completely auditable.
Let's apply this to a reentrancy guard. The EVM rationale, the synchronous call stack prevents state races. The SVM adaptation, account versioning or exclusive mutable borrows. And for the verification check we write, unit test CPI reentry attempt fails. Notice the actionable verb test there. Your checks absolutely must be actionable.
Checking the next row for nonce replay. The EVM rationale is node-enforced nonces. The adaptation is creating an explicit sequence inside the program. And for verification, fuzz test randomized sequence. Fuzz testing is so incredibly critical here to ensure your invariants actually hold up under reordered submissions in the SVM. It's the only way to thoroughly simulate that environmental divergence.
Finally, part 5, verification and next steps.
Let's quickly summarize this engineer's blueprint so you can actually start porting your own contracts safely. Here are your crucial takeaways. First, always name the exact environmental assumption. Second, prefer explicit program-level adaptations over relying on implicit environment invariants. You have to move that locus of enforcement to the artifacts you control. And third, accompany every single adaptation with an automatable verification check, whether that's a unit test, an integration test, or a static linter assertion.
I want to leave you with this core engineering philosophy to really chew on. A table without checks is a theory exercise. The table with tests becomes operational. Seriously, if your verification column doesn't have active verbs like test, assert, or simulate, you need to go back and fix it. Which leads us to our final, provocative question for the day. Are you still relying on invisible safety nets, or are you finally ready to explicitly build them yourself? Take the time to populate your own comparison table, prioritizing the mitigations you encounter the most. And bring that table with you to our next lesson in the module, Mitigations for Attacks Unique to SVM, where we're going to turn these adapted primitives into full checklist fragments. Thank you so much for joining me at the drafting table today for this explainer created by Forge College. Now, if you want to dive deeper into this subject, learn more about the EVM to SVN transition, and explore a ton of other Web3 topics, I highly encourage you to head over to forge.college right now to learn more. Keep building, keep verifying, and I'll see you in the next explainer.